Stranded on a deserted island, I found myself overwhelmed with uncertainty and fear. Not knowing what to do, I climbed to the top of a tall tree in hopes of spotting something that could offer a glimmer of hope. Scanning the horizon, all I could see was an endless expanse of sky and sea. But when I turned my gaze inland, I noticed something white in the far distance. Driven by curiosity and desperation, I descended the tree, gathered what little provisions I had left, and began making my way toward the mysterious white object. The journey was long, and for quite some time, I couldn't make out what it was. As I drew nearer, it became clear it was not a building or a ship, but a massive white dome, gleaming in the sun, towering with impressive size and perfect smoothness. I walked around the dome, searching for an entrance or even a crack, but it was seamless. There was no way to climb it either. The surface was slick and offered no grip. I estimated it to be at least 50 paces in circumference. The sun began to set. Suddenly, the sky darkened unnaturally, as if a storm cloud had covered the island. I was startled, but what truly terrified me was discovering the cause of the darkness, a bird of monstrous proportions, soaring directly toward me. I quickly realized it was the legendary roc, a bird so massive it was said to carry off elephants. In that moment, I understood the dome I had found was no man-made structure, it was the egg of this mythical beast. As the roc settled down over its egg, I seized a bold opportunity. I crept quietly to one of its legs, which was as thick as a tree trunk, and tied myself tightly to it using my turban, hoping the roc would carry me away from the island when it flew off the next morning. I spent the night clinging to that leg, hardly daring to breathe. At dawn, the roc spread its enormous wings and took flight. It rose so high into the sky that the earth disappeared from sight beneath me. Eventually, it descended with such speed that I fainted from the force of the fall. When I came to, I found myself lying on the ground in a completely new place, a deep, isolated valley surrounded by jagged mountains reaching up beyond the clouds. Far from being rescued, I had simply exchanged one prison for another. The valley was closed in on all sides, escape seemed impossible, and I would soon discover that this strange new place held even greater dangers than the island I had just left behind. As dawn broke, I awoke still tied to the enormous leg of the mythical roc. With the first rays of daylight, the bird spread its massive wings and soared high into the sky, taking me with it. The ascent was so rapid and dizzying that I quickly lost consciousness, overwhelmed by the height and the rush of the wind. When I finally came to my senses, I found myself on the ground again, the bird having landed briefly before taking off once more, this time clutching a gigantic serpent in its beak. Looking around, I discovered I had been deposited in a deep valley completely encircled by towering mountains that seemed to scrape the heavens. These mountains were so steep and sheer that escape seemed impossible. At first, I was disheartened, thinking I had gained nothing by escaping the deserted island only to end up trapped in this grim valley. Yet, as I wandered through the valley, I began to notice something astonishing. The ground was scattered with glittering diamonds, some of which were extraordinarily large. For a brief moment, my heart lifted. The dazzling gems caught the sunlight and sparkled like stars on the earth. But before I could revel in the discovery, a new terror emerged. In the distance, I spotted movement, giant serpents, enormous and horrifying in size, slithering between rocks. The smallest among them could easily swallow a full-grown elephant. These dreadful creatures slept through the day, hiding from the roc, their natural enemy, and only came out at night to hunt. Terrified, I spent the daylight hours cautiously exploring and looking for a place to shelter. As evening approached, I found a small cave nestled in the side of a mountain. I quickly dragged a heavy rock over the entrance to protect myself from the serpents, though I left a small opening so light could enter. I nibbled at my remaining provisions and tried to rest, but the hissing of snakes outside the cave filled me with so much fear that sleep escaped me entirely. With the return of daylight, the serpents slithered back into their dark hiding places, and I cautiously left the cave, still trembling. I wandered aimlessly, trying to think of a way to escape the valley, but there seemed no path out. At last, exhausted, I sat down and drifted into a brief, uneasy sleep. Suddenly, I was jolted awake by a loud thud next to me. A huge piece of raw meat had landed beside me. I looked up in surprise and saw more pieces falling from the cliffs above. In that moment, I realized the truth behind the ancient stories I'd once dismissed as legends. This was indeed the Valley of Diamonds, and I had just witnessed the famous merchant trick, tossing meat into the valley so diamonds would stick to it, only to be retrieved later when eagles carried the meat and the gems back to their nests. Seeing the large chunks of meat falling into the valley confirmed what I had once thought to be mere sailors' tales. This was indeed the Valley of Diamonds, and I was witnessing the very strategy used by merchants to retrieve the precious stones. I remembered hearing stories of traders who would throw large pieces of raw meat into the valley. When the meat landed on the sharp diamonds, the gems would stick to it. Then eagles, large and strong birds native to this region, would swoop down, seize the meat, and carry it back to their nests high on the cliffs to feed their young. This clever trick was not just folklore, it was real. And in that realization, I saw a chance to escape. The same eagles that carried the meat and diamonds could carry me out too. I sprang into action. Scouring the valley floor, I picked up the largest and finest diamonds I could find and placed them carefully into the leather bag I had used to carry my food supplies. Then I chose the largest piece of meat I could lift and tied it securely to my back with cloth torn from my turban. To make sure I wouldn't be separated from my treasure, I also tied the bag of diamonds tightly to my belt. Lying face down on the ground, I waited nervously, my heart pounding as I anticipated what would come next. It wasn't long before a mighty eagle swooped down. Mistaking the meat, and me along with it, as prey, it seized the entire bundle in its powerful talons and soared into the sky. I clung tightly, suspended in the air, climbing higher and higher until the valley disappeared from sight. Soon enough, the eagle reached its nest, perched high on a mountain ledge, and dropped me inside. Before I could gather my thoughts, shouting erupted around me. The eagle had been frightened off by a group of merchants who had climbed up to collect diamonds from the nests. One of them spotted me lying there and was startled. He had never seen a person arrive this way. At first, he was furious, accusing me of stealing his goods. I calmly assured him that I meant no harm and told him that I had my own diamonds, more than enough for both of us. As I opened my bag, the other merchants arrived, drawn by the commotion. They stared in amazement at the size and brilliance of the diamonds I had gathered. When I explained how I had tied myself to the meat and flown with the eagle, their astonishment deepened. I offered the merchant whose nest I had landed in a share of the gems, but he modestly took only the smallest one, saying it was enough to make his fortune and spare him the need for future voyages. That night, I stayed with the merchants and retold my incredible tale to those who hadn't heard it yet. I was overwhelmed with gratitude and joy to have escaped the dangers of the valley. For the first time in many days, I slept peacefully, rich in both gems and experience. The next morning, having shared my story and my diamonds with the merchants, we prepared to leave the treacherous valley behind. The traders had collected enough jewels over the past few days, each satisfied with the fortune they had acquired using their clever method of meat and eagles. As the sun rose, we began our journey away from the Valley of Diamonds, our hearts lighter with relief and our packs heavier with riches. We traveled across rugged terrain, following narrow mountain paths. These peaks were home to more serpents, massive, terrifying creatures of incredible length. But fortune favored us again, and we managed to avoid any deadly encounters. Eventually, we reached a coastal town where we found a ship preparing to sail. Without hesitation, we boarded and set off toward new lands. Our first major stop was the Isle of Roha, a remarkable place known for its enormous camphor trees. These trees were so vast that 100 men could sit comfortably beneath a single one for shade. The air carried the fragrant scent of camphor, a substance highly prized across the world. It was harvested by drilling into the upper part of the tree. The sap would ooze out into a container, harden over time, and become the white, crystalline camphor that traders valued greatly. However, the process was fatal to the tree. Once the camphor was extracted, the tree withered and died. While exploring the island, I also saw the great rhinoceros, a beast larger than a buffalo but smaller than an elephant. It had a single, solid horn growing from its nose, split down the middle. I was told that this powerful creature often fought elephants. With a furious charge, it would plunge its horn into the elephant's belly, lift the massive beast onto its head, and carry it off. But the fight did not end there. The elephant's blood and fat would eventually blind the rhinoceros, causing it to collapse. What happened next was even more astounding. The legendary bird, the roc, would descend from the sky and carry both the dead elephant and the rhinoceros away in its enormous claws to feed its young. I could scarcely believe such tales, but having seen the roc with my own eyes in the valley, I no longer doubted what seemed like fantasy. At Roha, I traded a portion of my diamonds for rare goods and treasures. From there, our voyage continued to other islands, where I marveled at new landscapes and exchanged stories with travelers from distant lands. Eventually, we reached the mainland and stopped at several bustling trade towns. Each one offered its own unique wares and customs, and I felt my world grow larger with each stop. Finally, we arrived at the great city of Basra. From there, I journeyed onward to Baghdad, where I decided to rest and enjoy the rewards of my hard-won fortune. I gave generously to the poor and lived with honor and comfort. After surviving so many dangers and witnessing so many wonders, I knew I had earned not just wealth, but wisdom.